we're good to go. Okay. Well, you know, I thank Dave for giving me the opportunity, because I always enjoy coming out and meeting a smaller group of folks that I know well, but also the folks that have joined the club in recent years. And for me, this is an example of the very best time of the year to be thinking about these kinds of things, because the equal day and night comes up in 3 weeks' time, 21st of March, and then we're into summer. Already, gliding is well underway in the States. I don't know how many of you follow OLC, online contest, but the folks are spooling up down in Florida. Some very good flights yesterday, 200 miles up north, 200 miles south, all around Orlando. So what we hope to do today, I think, is to just remind ourselves about cross-country. For so many people in gliding, cross-country becomes the biggest hook to staying in gliding and the greatest way to have fun. You know, everybody likes to take someone up for a ride around the field. The instructors love to instruct. There's lots of things that have to be done well in gliding, but for the individual, in the long term, if you can become a competent cross-country pilot, you are going to continue to have so much fun, and there are so many things you can yet learn. It's a never-ending process, as I say in my book. You need to have the attitude of you can learn something on every flight. Well, believe me, you can learn lots of things on every cross-country flight. So let me start just quickly and ask, would anyone give me a quick definition of what is cross-country flying in a glider? What is it?
Challenge.
Yes.
Oh, flying away from your home airport.
Well, that's almost exactly what I would have told you. Go ahead, Joe.
I would say it's wherever you're outside of the glide distance to your home.
Exactly. Now, those are the two absolute clear definitions of cross-country flying. Being out there, having fun, but being away from being able to get back to the field in one straight glide. You're out of the gliding distance. So it's a little bit... what would I say? You get anxious on the first couple of cross-country flights, to be honest. And we'll go through the slide presentation. And what I suggest is let's go through the presentation, and then you can make notes of anything you want to expand on that afterwards. But I've put it together in a format which addresses cross-country flying as much as I possibly can. So here we are at the largest soaring club in Indiana, a club that I belonged to for 40 years. I don't see who else here has been. Brad would be, I think, almost certainly
probably 30.
30 something.
30
Okay.
years. Yeah, 32.
And for me, 40 years was easy because I was enjoying every moment of my flying. See if this works here. Yeah, it does. The importance of planning. Now, planning has changed over the years dramatically. Welcome. In the good old days, there were only charts. See that chart hanging on the wall over there?
Yeah.
That's a combination of all the flights I made in my early years. Now, there were no data recorders and there were no moving maps to use in the cockpit. You had to use a chart. Now, my chart wasn't that big. It was just little. For each of those flights, I had a chart. And if you look at the chart in the top there, you'll see a little flight there. Okay, that is a 30-mile flight. That's my first silver distance flight. It's on the chart up front as well. But part of succeeding in cross-country is to plan it all. There's the first flight I ever made, and considered myself then a cross-country flyer. Thereafter, I chalked up flights like my first 300-kilometer triangle, another 300-kilometer triangle, a 500-kilometer out and return, that's about 300 miles, and there's several, what's happened to my little zapper here? Okay. That's a 600-kilometer out and return. And then what was in those days the largest FAI triangle ever set in a contest anywhere in the world, it was 750 kilometers. Each leg was 250 kilometers. That's over 450 miles, I think, was that flight that day. So I kept track of it. And the way you kept track of your flights in those days was to use a barograph. There were no such things as recorders. So what I'm talking about is all old school now. But this barograph I carried for 35 or 40 years. It never let me down to my memory. But you know, most folks in gliding today won't even know what a barograph is. It's been sitting in this cupboard here. So if somebody wants to use it sometime, you could. Okay, so
Is that the smoke, Trace?
well, you could, in the good old days, you used to smoke
Right.
the cylinder there, and then there was a little scratcher that would scratch the trace for you on it. And I'll go through and show you some of that in subsequent. Yeah. Okay. So we talked about a little bit of apprehension on your first charts when you get in the first time you do it yourself. Now that little aeroplane or little glider, I don't know if you could pick out what it is. Anyone any idea what kind of glider that is?
We do now.
It's like a KA.
It's a K. It's a KA. Okay. Well, geez, I was looking at the wrong. Okay, so you know that was the standard. You had to. I tell a story about going solo because you went solo. You were trained in a K7, a two-seater, and then when you were ready to go solo, they said, "Well, we think you're ready now. Get the club to pull the K8 out." So they pull out this little glider. I've never been in it before, and they want me to go solo in it. They said, "Well, everybody else does it. This is the way we do it in those days." So that little glider is much better. Is not nearly as good as the single-seater we have in the club here. This has got a L over D of about 27 to 1, I think. And the 134 has got an L over D of a best of, I think, about 134, if I'm not mistaken. So you actually have a better chance in the club when you want to go solo. You've got a better piece of equipment to work with in the 134. Everybody remember or sort of remember what the best L over D on the Globe and the ASK are?
36. 36, I believe.
36? That's a
36
good
on,
guess,
on the Grove, 34 on the
And
ASK.
and a little bit less on the ASK.
Yeah.
But I think of the club gliders as having, on average, about a 35 to 1. Now, what does 35 to 1 mean in performance when you're going to go cross country? What do you know? How far can you go from a mile up in the sky?
34 miles.
34 miles, okay. And how far is a mile up in the sky? What's that above the ground?
5,000 feet.
5,000 feet. So how many miles can you go for every 1,000 feet you're up there?
Theoretically.
Yeah, 34, theoretically. Yeah.
About 7 at the very best, but I would figure on a little more conservatively 5 miles. So every time you're a mile above the ground, you're at 5,000 in this area, you can now go 35 miles pretty much. 5,000 feet times 5 miles per 1,000 feet. So moving on from that, cross-country flying is what it's all about eventually. Now, this is the picture that you will see most frequently in the Midwest, in Indiana. Clouds, what's a good day for cross-country here, Brad?
Oh, I'd say, when they're forecasting 3 knots and cloud base.
How many feet above ground are the clouds?
5 to 6.
Huh?
5 to 6.
5 to 6, okay.
Because we're at 1,000, so.
If you hold out for 6 every time, you won't be flying quite as often. But 4 to 5 will get you up there and give you enough confidence to start going cross country. So 4,000 above the ground, you can definitely go out on cross country quite confidently. Everything needs a plan when you begin doing this, so you have to start thinking about these numbers, and before you get into the glider you think, well, today if I can get to a mile above the ground, I can go 34 miles before I'm on the ground again. There are some basic questions that I think everybody who's going to go cross country needs to ask themselves. ask yourself as this goes through the screening, have you gone with an instructor in a two-seater? Have you flown several tasks within gliding distance of home? Have you landed at airfields other than the home base? How familiar with the performance of the equipment you fly, the distance per 1,000 feet in different wind conditions? Best feats to fly? Do you know the minimum sink speed on the glider you're flying? How good are you at map reading in the air? How many long flights have you made? 1 to 3 hours. The proposed discipline system for cross-country flying, height below which you'll always have a landable field. Checklist system for off-field landings. Equipment list for cross-country flights. Crew arrangements, very important. Have you discussed the procedures with an experienced cross-country pilot, or a particular flight that you have in mind with an experienced cross-country pilot? Does anything jump out there at you as being particularly important?
Yeah.
What's that?
Well, the height below which you'll always have a landable field. Because
Okay, and what would that be?
that would be 1,500 feet above the ground. I start to get a little nervous.
Okay.
But I always want to know what's around me.
Height below which you would have a landable field within reach. Okay. So after that, if you've got it within reach, now, or if you get lower than that, then what?
Well, if you get lower than that and the thermals, you know, if it's one of those days where the thermals are spaced pretty far apart and you can't find anything, you need to start preparing yourself to land. Maybe call one of the other pilots and say, I'm thinking of landing out. Really look at the field real well. Of course, in Indiana, we don't have a lot of hills, but look for a road nearby.
Yeah.
Look for, telephone poles, electric lines,
Right.
fences, livestock.
Okay.
Let me interject in here. The Safety Soaring Foundation kind of goes by the 3-2-1 rule.
Yes.
At 3,000 feet, kind of have the field in mind. 2,000 feet, identify a field, stay around until you climb away. If you get down to 1,000 feet, commit yourself to landing.
Okay, very good, Tom. Well, that's an easy one to remember. Yeah.
Yeah, that is it.
All of this success in cross-country flying really depends on planning. Lots of planning, lots of awareness of what you're going to do, and then awareness of what's going on in the sky around you. Are the conditions improving? Are they kind of marginal, or are they actually declining? You've got to keep thinking about those kinds of things when you do cross-country flying in a glider. So, this is a wonderful program that was introduced to the club by Kerry. The program was initiated, I think he told me, in Canada. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a club in Canada that started it.
And it's a kind of a step-by-step approach to getting yourself going cross-country. There's the racetrack, which is the green trace, the sprint, which is the yellow trace, and then the ultra, which is the red trace. Now, the yellow and the red traces have got airports at each of the turn points, so that gives you a lot of confidence and gets you ready to say, well, the day is right and I'm going to go out on that course because I'm pretty much able to get there from here. Not quite, I need a couple of good thermals. But you don't start off by doing the red course. That's 84 miles, it's about almost 30 miles each leg. You don't start with doing the sprint either. That's only 58 miles, but that's about 20 miles each leg, something like that. You start with the little green one, and in this you're going to need a little bit of help. I talked to Carrie about this before. When you take off from Alexander Airfield and you want to do the little racetrack course with an instructor preferably, but if you've already gone solo, you can do it yourself. You can start. You can get to and begin from 4,000 feet above the ground. You're pretty much in a situation where you can always make it back to the field if things are deteriorating. If you are losing altitude and you can't seem to find another thermal, you can veer back towards Alex. So if you're serious about going cross country and you haven't done any cross country, the first thing you should consider doing is going with an instructor, and the instructor can get you in trouble if anyone's going to be in trouble. His responsibility. But once you've really got some reasonable confidence and you can get the little single-seater glider for yourself, you start off with the green one. Now, the only thing there is to talk to someone like Kerry about what those actual turn points are. We all know what the refinery looks like, the old gas, what's it? Ethanol plant just north of the field here. But Reed Station and Prosperity are little towns apparently, and so you need to ask, well, which road it's on. It looks to me like Reed Station is on 9, is it on
Yeah,
Highway
it's
9?
a little bit west of 9.
A little bit west of 9, okay. And then
And then Reed Station is a little bit east of the interstate.
just a little bit east of the interstate, yeah. So this is the sort of step-by-step approach to going cross-country. You don't jump into it without thinking, and this is a very nice and logical process that gets you there. Importance of checklists. Everybody has their own checklist, and this is mine. I've brought a couple of copies for anyone that would use it. You all know the checklist which you use for landing back at the field, but when you're away from the field, I'd say something like pre-landing could be what you would be thinking of in that situation, because it's at a field that you don't know, and it might just be a farmer's field. This time of the year, absolutely perfect, except when there's been a lot of rain like there has. But, I mean, Indiana is like one big airfield in the months of March, April and May. Well, let's say April and May would be the two really good starting cross-country times. You need to know a radio frequency on if it's a little airport that you're going to. You need to radio your intentions as to what you're going to do there. If it's a farmer's field, you need to assess the size of it, the slope of it, and most important of all, it's not even on there, I think it goes without saying, is the wind. You always want to land into wind if you can, because it makes your landing run much shorter, and it's much safer than landing at a higher speed, which you have to do when you're landing downwind. You need to look at the obstacles in the way. Once in my career, I had not observed that there was a power line, a big high-tension power line when I turned finals to land in a field, and boy, that got my attention quickly. I had to decide whether to go under or over them. I think it's always better to go over if you can, but obstacles on approach to a field are very, very important. Are there trees on the edge of the field, and it's a small field? The slope plays a really big important part when you're flying on ridges and that, and you have to land. Often the landing area is on quite a steep slope, and it's very difficult to land on a steep slope. I mean, even world-class pilots, Jerry could tell you, and what's the glider, that Polish glider landed on Sebastian Carver landed and did some substantial damage. He's one of the better pilots in the world, and landing on a steep slope is very difficult.
He is the best.
You obviously need to have your wheel down. You need to have any ballast out. You don't want to land with water ballast unless you have to. I put glasses off because, for me, wearing bifocals, I always found it a little unnerving landing. I always took my bifocals off. My long vision was good, so that's just a Ron Clarke checklist. You don't have to take your glasses off if you don't want to. And then, for me, U-stall was always the checklist of what to do when making an out landing. Any comments? Okay, so again, old tech here. If you're going to get serious, you do need to start looking at getting a flight recorder. The club has some flight recorders. I recall that Andy gave us several to use. I don't know how
There's
wide.
one for each of the club gliders. We have three.
Three of them
Yeah.
fly with CE.
Yeah.
You need to get somebody to help you, because if you're going to claim any kind of flights, badge flights, distance flights, today they require that you provide a log of the flight. In the old days, the old barogram was what you provided, with a signature from somebody saying, you know, this is all valid, and you know, I was his witness. So, but for me, I got by for many, many years, and I would suggest that when you start off, you put on a chart the two flights you're considering to do. Both of these are still available records for Indiana if anyone's interested in a two-seater in the Grove or the ASK. These are 220 something kilometer flights, which if pre-declared, you could get yourself the state record. So I used to keep these with me, and if you look on the bottom left-hand side of the chart there, I put the frequencies of the different airfields on the chart, so you don't have to squint and put your bifocals back on to see what the frequency is. It's all there for you to see. The likely fields you would be landing at would be Newcastle, Metro, or Boone County, and all the frequencies are there. And I put north on the map there, so I didn't get too confused while I was flying. It's easy to sometimes be going south when you think you're going north. And I did the same for, I don't know if I've put this in as well, but yeah, this was an out and return down to the Louisville Club, down at Seymour. You draw a line on the map, and I'm going to suggest at the end of this session that we each take one of these charts that we have here today, and you mark on that the next cross-country flight you're going to do, and you'll have it in your pocket every time you come out here, and you're ready to do that. But for me, I just kept these in the glider because these were a couple of flights I wanted to do, and before I sort of sold my glider, and that system still works very well. Yes, Tom.
Dave told me that he's working with Sheridan to try to get us a Sheridan day.
Yes.
We'll fly down there. They'll have a tow plane down there.
I heard that, and I said, excellent idea, excellent. The only question I had about that is, you might want to check the exact distance from here to Sheridan, because I think if you fly there, you could get your silver distance flight.
Huh?
Yeah.
Depends on which end of the runway you take off from.
Well, that you see, this is it's a little bit close, and you've got to be almost exact on this. I looked into it the other day, but I think that's an excellent idea to be sure that you get your low point on the east side of Alex, because when you get to Sheridan, does everyone know the rules on silver badge as to how much altitude you can use? You can look it up. You know, there's several books written. I looked today to see Bob Wander wrote the A, B, and C badge. He also wrote one about getting the silver badge. And you need to look at that and understand that you may not use up more than 1% of the distance from your starting altitude to your ending altitude. So in other words, if it's a 50 kilometer flight that's 33 miles, you may only use 0.33 of a mile altitude. So you can't go up and start at 10,000 feet and fly there and get your silver badge. There's a restriction on the height limitation of your start. Am I explaining it right?
Yeah, it's around, I think it's around 1,600.
1730 is what it is. I know, I've looked it up before several times. So there are these little things you need to learn. I mean, this is part of the whole process. You don't just go cross country. There's a penalty. You have to learn a few things along the way, and it's fun doing that. And it's all there for you to find out. I mean, I wrote there what you have to do to qualify for the badge. Okay, so moving on here. And there it is. There's my original flight. You can go up and have a look at it on the chart, posted on the wall there. It was a green line from the place I took off with. In this case, airfield I took off with was 1,500 feet lower than the one I was going to land at, so I didn't have any problem.
Oh, jeez.
And there's the old barogram that was generated by the flight on this exact barograph that's sitting here. Somebody signed it to say yes, they saw me land there, and it was a good landing. And so today things have changed. You do have to understand the electronic world, because that's what you're going to use to file your claim for your silver badge or your silver altitude gain or whatever it is. It has to be done on a electronic piece of electronic equipment nowadays. I've kept all this stuff. My wife thinks I'm crazy, but I've kept lists and write-ups on every flight I ever made in my life in a glider, and that for me was so motivational to say, wow, I achieved another 500-mile flight or a 300-mile flight or whatever it was, and it's all there. Nobody can take it away from you. Oh yes, yeah. Yeah, you've heard of this, have you? The French have a word for landing out. What, you know what the translation of that is?
With the cows.
To go with the cows, exactly. And it's a common term that's used around the gliding world, to go en vache, or it used to be. So you do need to begin to think especially about off-field landings. Like I said, in May and June, Indiana's like one big airfield, but there are lots of other times of the year when the corn is up and the beans are up. You can't just think about landing in corn or beans. It doesn't work like that. So, oh gosh. Some of the most fun experiences I've had in my life have been landing out and meeting farmers. And I don't know how many of you read my book. I brought a couple of copies here if you're interested. But I landed once in a very difficult area. It was a grazing area in Africa. No pastures, no crops at all, except for alfalfa. And so you looked out for alfalfa fields wherever you went when you were in trouble. And I identified an alfalfa field. At the end of the day, I knew I would have to land there, so I radioed back and told my wife, Thea, to stand by. So I ended up landing in this pasture, and I thought, well, this will be a first for the farmer. They would not have ever had a glider land here. I'm almost certain of that. So I landed, and there was a widow who owned this farm, really nice woman. She said, wow, she said, this is the second glider that's landed here in 2 years. I said, really? I said, who landed here before? She said, a fellow by the name of Alf Warminger from England. He was down in Africa and he was flying. He landed in that field. I thought, well, this is amazing. She said, he sends me a Christmas card every year. So I had dinner with her that night, and Thea came with the trailer, and we took the glider apart, an old Zugvogel glider in those days. And scroll the years on, 3 or 4 years I was living in England, and I landed out on a horse racetrack. It's not the best place to land. It's not such a long runway. But I landed quite successfully, and I wanted to quickly get to a telephone to tell Thea where I was. There were no cell phones in those days. So I had some coins to feed a phone that took coin phone. And so we had a nice evening together in Stratford-on-Avon. We went back, and I was ready the next morning up to get going again to fly my glider the next day. I didn't have anyone to help me rig it, so the first guy that drove onto the field, I waved him over and I said, say, would you give me a hand here and help? Oh, big old Nimbus glider. He helped me put it together, standing on the one wing, I'm standing on the other. And he said, we haven't met yet, have we? I said, no, we haven't met. He said, well, where are you from? I said, South Africa. Oh, he said, South Africa. He said, I once went down there to fly records in South Africa. He said, I was in the middle of nowhere. He said, there was nowhere to land except a little alfalfa field. He said, I landed there. He said, I said, where was that? He said, down in the dry country, in the Karoo. I said, really? I said, whereabouts? And he told me the name of the town. I said, your name must be Alf Warminger. He said, what? You know my name? How is that possible? I said, I landed in the same field. And that's a true story.
Oh, wow. Awesome. It's a small world.
And that's going au vache. So, talk about planning. You know, here you are. You may be thinking about a flight that you want to plan to get your silver distance, or to get a small state record, or to go in the two-seater with somebody else from the club to get a state record. You know, the ultimate in planning is flights is like this. Now, I flew twice across the country in a glider, and this was the return to Kitty Hawk to celebrate the 100 years of Kitty Hawk. Every flight we had to plan. Every day we had to make up charts, just like this, with all the possible fields that you might land at, airfields and that. There was 10 legs, or 11 legs. The last leg was just a ceremonial flight into Kitty Hawk at the end of it all. But a lot of work has to go into this. You know, if you're serious about flying across America, a lot of work has to go into each of those legs. I also tell the story about Brad had a friend who lived out in Arizona, and he was a very good pilot. Does he still fly gliders?
No,
He did at the time anyway. So I
not a
wrote to him
citation.
and said, Casey, tell me about the conditions that I could expect going from Estrella, Arizona to Las Cruces, New Mexico. I'd never met him, and he sent me a whole string of areas to fly over, and what mountains, Mount Lemon to look out for on the way. It's the highest mountain, 16,000 feet. And, you know, there's always information that you can incorporate into whatever flight you're doing. And for me, that was one of the great cross-country experiences ever. I had 2 crew members from this club. Does anyone recognize the... I'm in the middle, by the way, at the top, but there are 2 crew members. They were club members here. Any? Dick Deutsch, Dick
Hutchison.
Hutchison on the right, and John, what was John's name? Dietrich, yeah. They flew with me on the leg from here going on to Kitty Hawk, and on the way our first stop was down at Caesar Creek, so we made it a double worthwhile. We landed at Caesar Creek and we picked up the little trophy that we had going between our club and Caesar Creek and took it on with us to Kitty Hawk, so they couldn't come back and pick it up the next day. And of course this was just flying into Kitty Hawk at the end of it all. How many of you been to Kitty Hawk? Oh, quite a lot. It's they wanted us to land on the concrete runway there, and we argued and argued for a long time, and they finally let us land on the grass going up to the monument there, which was the original area. It used to be almost beach area in those days, and they let us land there in the end. So off-field landings don't always have to be a long way away. Anyone recognize where that is?
Is it just over here?
You can see what time of the year it is. It's an ideal time to land out. It's half a mile from here to the west.
To the west, yeah.
And that was me in the club glider. You always have to have a crew to come and help you. You need to plan for that when you start doing cross country. You want to have an arrangement with somebody who's going to come and pick you up if you don't get home. And the other thing that's really important is understanding the trailer system. And you've got to use the club trailer. We've got a trailer that will take either the Grove or the ASK 21. And then there's the separate trailer for the what's the single seat?
134.
Okay. So it can happen to you close by, and I wasn't afraid to land there that day. I knew that it was marginal to get past the power lines and come in going to the east, so I just landed. It's the first farm to the west of us here.
It's our friend down there.
Pardon?
The friendly farmer.
Well, none of them are also friendly around here. So yeah, that's a big part of landing out, is being absolutely friendly and assuring them that you've done no damage, and if you've done any damage, you'll take responsibility, or your insurance will take responsibility. I can remember helping Brad back from a field many years ago. The farmer wasn't happy at all.
It was just right off the runway of Brookside, remember?
That's right.
No,
What did he want from you?
Well, he was kind of upset because it was July the 4th or 3rd or something like that. It was a real hot day. I think the beans were that tall. But, how many police cars? He had the sheriff was there, the town
The sheriff
policeman. Yeah.
He wanted to charge you for an acre of beans or something.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it was ridiculous, but we worked our way through it, and you just got to be very nice about it all.
Yep.
Again, I might have put it in my book, I don't remember, but I landed out in a little town in Montana once, and it was a nice field I landed in, and it didn't do any damage at all, and just came to a halt, and a short while later a farmer and his little son came up, and we had a long chat, and I put the son in the cockpit and took a photograph of him and eventually sent it to them, and that. My crew eventually arrived, and we took the glider apart, put it in the trailer, and just before we left, the farmer said, "Hey," he said, "I need $50 from you." I said, $50? I said, "What would that be for?" I said, "No damage to the crop. The crop wasn't even up yet." "Oh," he said, "the other glider landed in the field the other day. He gave me $50. So I gave him $50.
Success.
My wife Thea has been such a great crew for me over the years. Now here's the situation where it's actually quite easy on the crew. We're flying a glider with a motor in it, and Barry Jaeger, my good friend, in the back seat there. We can always pop the motor if we need to, so she really never came and picked us up, but she helped us run the wing every day and put the glider together. You need to, if you can, come up with a buddy in the club who's willing to work with you. Maybe both of you are wanting to get your silver badge, or want to go cross country together and get a little record in a two-seater. But whenever you do that, you've got to have a good crew standing by to help you when you need it. And when you really get involved in cross country, it will keep you going, and you will continue to have so much fun that when you are, I'd say the average age of these pilots here is 70. It might even be a little higher. It might be 72 or 74. But these are all pilots who have been flying their cross-country every opportunity they get. And that contest, which starts next week down in Florida, is always the first contest in the year each year. It's the seniors. In order to get into it nowadays, it used to only be maybe 30 people and you could get in pretty easily. Now it's 60 and it's oversubscribed. You have to have a ranking, you have to have done well in a couple of contests in the country to get into it. But these folks can't wait to get down there and fly. In fact, if you look at OLC for yesterday, lots of them are down there practicing for this contest. Starts next week, and they're all oldies like these guys you see there. I'm standing in the back on the right side. Guy with a red cap on is George Moffat. Anyone know who George Moffat was? He was the only American that's ever won 3 world championships. He wrote a book. There's several copies of his book here. It's called Winning on the Wind. But cross country is what drives this crowd of people, and you can be part of that too. You can get there. I can't get there now. I can't. I don't have any more contest years ahead of me, but up through your mid-70s, and some of these guys are into their middle 80s now. Carl Streidig still flies there every year. So keep yourself fit and get into cross country, and you'll discover how much fun there is with it, and it goes on almost forever. One thing about landing out that I've always felt very strongly about, I have strongly resisted ever landing on roads, because I've known of a number of folks that have come to grief landing on roads. Roads seems like a good idea. It's always smooth and blacktop. I was driving to a contest, a world contest, And there was a terrific thunderstorm. It was absolute thunder and hail and lightning everywhere. And a glider was approaching me directly. I was on the road and this glider was coming to land. I had to pull off the road to the side. And Marku Kutunen from Norway landed his glider successfully. But look at it. I mean, there are poles and light poles on the side. The road is only a little two-lane road. And so I've always said to folks, don't think about landing on roads. You can't from the sky see whether there are posts or signs on the side of the road, and that you're really asking for trouble. So just a friendly reminder that he was soaking wet by the time two of us held the wings of the glider while the hail was coming down. And this was, the pictures were taken after it all cleared, but before his crew arrived. Don't land on roads. Okay, so where do you get to fly really good thermals? What you learn to do flying at Soar Indy is you learn to use thermals to stay up. Where are the best thermals in America? Jerry's
West.
out west. Okay, we'll talk about that. But right here in the next 8 weeks are some of the best gliding conditions you will get in Indiana. You will get to, someone will probably get to 9,000 or 10,000 feet this year, taking off from this field. Excellent, excellent thermal conditions here. The real great thermals in America are all out west, in Utah, Nevada, and here I am in my old Nimbus, not my Nimbus, my Ventus, 17,000 feet on the altimeter on the right, and still climbing at 10 knots. You know, the sky is the limit out west. I mean, 18,000 is the ceiling generally, because that's Class A airspace. So you're limited by that unless you get a waiver from the control tower somewhere. So out west is the best place to fly thermals. And here's a description, and of course it reminds you that you need to be filling up with oxygen out there when you're flying cross country out there. You have to top off your oxygen tanks every day. But I regard the picture on the bottom right as a photograph of what a good day at Ely, Nevada looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys with all their equipment loaded at the takeoff point on the runway, that field looked like that for the whole day until everybody got back that night. Many of them having flown 1,000 kilometers using thermals, mostly thermals. Some ridge occasionally on the mountains out there, and some wave, but it's mostly thermal flying. So
Ely,
Jerry's
Nevada.
right, go west.
Ely, Nevada?
Pardon?
Ely, Nevada?
Ely, Nevada, yes.
Oh, I know it's that.
It's a wonderful place, and it has a huge benefit in that there's a little mountain range right close to the airfield, and so you can get off early in the day. The sun shines onto that mountain range. You go straight there, and you can make an early start. You know, many places where it's just flat, you don't get that advantage. So they don't have a regular operation there, but each year a bunch of guys get together and take a tow plane out there. So you just have to keep asking questions and keep checking if anyone's going to Ely this year, because it's an incredible place to fly. But the other end of the spectrum, and this is a place where Brad Hayes and I have flown quite a bit, you can take off, this was at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you can fly all day. I once flew 900 kilometers, I was trying for 1,000. This was at 8 o'clock in the morning, you had to photograph, well, along with this, you had to have a camera in the glider to photograph your turn point. This was the VOR beacon on the ridge at Sequatchie. I think you've probably seen that, Gary. You've been up as far as the VOR beacon.
I think it's the Hitch Mountain VOR.
That's where we took the ASK for the ridge camp.
And that's where you landed off the ridge too, didn't you, in the
Yes.
field there?
I mean,
Yeah, that's the one rule. You can never, when you're flying ridges, you're never 2,000 feet above a landing area. You're only a couple of hundred feet above a landing area. But we have this advantage that there's a camp going there. I think it's next week, is it?
I think it's the last 2 weeks in March.
Okay,
Sarah's
it'll be the
camp?
week after the seniors,
Yeah,
so
I
it's
think
about
so.
3 weeks' time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sarah Arnold runs a field down in Tennessee, a glider port, and she brings a tow plane up, and you can fly these ridges. In fact, Brad was telling me that Carl Strydick and John Good are offering to take you for rides on the ridges there in their two-seater gliders. I know Tony in the club was down there the year you
Yeah.
were there, and I think
Yeah.
Dave Colclasher was there. Has Rich been there? Rich Smith?
Yeah, Rich
Yeah.
was there.
There are a bunch of guys in the club who've been down there and flown on these ridges, and it's long days. I mean, I was in the air 9.5 hours on this ridge one time.
You went all the way down to Alabama that one
that's
day.
right.
Down
You
to
go down to
Gaston,
Alabama and then back up to Virginia, going north again before you come home.
and then the ridge disappears. That's the
Yeah,
very end of the
yeah,
ridge. down
for a
to
section
Gaston.
you have to do thermals
Yeah.
to contact the ridge that runs up into Pennsylvania. So cross-country soaring, am I describing all the different options that exist? Huh? I hope so. Yeah, this is part of the fun of it. Now again, there's Dick Hutchison is there on the picture at the bottom right there. There's two farmers on either side, and Dick Hutchison, my crew, my trusty crew, brought the old glider trailer out to Ohio, and I landed at Zanesville. I took off at Terry Airport, which is 20 miles to the west of us here. At the end of the day, we had a wonderful evening together with all those farmers at a dinner place in Zanesville. So, okay, here's a picture circa. Who was here in 1980 in the club? Yes, Brad was. No, you weren't. Okay, well, there are some folks there. If you look carefully, you probably recognise. No, I don't think there are. Anyway, the point was on this one to say that the club has now got better equipment than we had. In those days, we did all our training in the old Schweitzers. So, they're not cross-country machines. I mean, we had the Grove. The Grove's been in this club for a long, long time. And then we had a Blanick, and we had a little PW5. But today, with two fiberglass two-seaters and the single-seater, you've got more equipment to use than we even had in the 1980s, although we had a few more airplanes then. And so for me, that all adds up to what I consider to be 50 years of fun in the sky. Want to take a break for a while? What I'd like to do is I'd like to make sure that before we go, we each take one of these charts here, and I've put up some the way I used to draw. I draw a 100-kilometer triangle, and you can play with it on the chart and see where you might like to do a 100 triangles, starting here at one of the points, or it could be at the middle of a leg somewhere. Draw yourself a little course on that map if that's what you want to do as your first cross-country effort, or if you want a 200-kilometer triangle and try for a record. Those of you who are a little more experienced, you could take one of these and you can mark on the map or arrange it on the map as to how you would do that. Whoops. And then if you really want to do a big one, there's a 300-kilometer triangle. And so let's take a break, and then let's come back and just come up with a course that you might want to plan on implementing this year sometime.
Yeah, which is a good idea.
I was flying for sure. I mean, I don't know what websites people use for weather now and gliding, but there's one that I still use, and I really swear by.
Blip. Dr. Jack.
Dr.
What
Jack.
website is
Yeah,
that?
that's what I use.
Huh?
That's all I use.
Dr. Jack has been around forever. He was a meteorologist, and you go to drjack.org,
Blip map.
and you can find out. We could even get it.
Yeah.
Computer.
Dr. Jack?
Dr. Jack. Dr. Jack.
It's called, the site's called Blip Maps. Blip Maps.
It's .org. Isn't it?
I don't know. I have a shortcut. I just did a.
You Google it.
You know, back in the 80s when I was hang gliding, we looked at the lapse rate. That was the thing we looked at.
Dr. Jack.
We looked at the soundings. And
For the
that was at
local
Baltimore.
weather.
So like,
Internet.
did you guys do like the lifted over K charts or anything? Or just,
Yeah, it was a steam. It's a steam chart. I mean, it
Oh,
was.
great picture.
Where you look at the adiabatic, look at the labs. They'd send a balloon up
Yeah, you
every
can
morning.
I was coming off of
And
and
you get a
onto the
-3 or
highway.
-4 on the lapse
And
rate. It was,
there was a hog.
so,
I mean,
which is
he
what
was
you're
right
doing,
with
doing the
me.
dew point spread.
And I
everything else.
probably had 10, 12 seconds where this hawk was just flying right along beside me. He was maybe 20 feet
Is
away
there a
from me.
Wi-Fi?
I was just
Where was this?
Here with this.
Were you in your plane?
Yeah, no, this was driving.
Oh, really?
He was hovering over the. It was
That's cool.
I was northbound on Keystone, taking the cloverleaf to get on to 465 going west, and he was over that little part there.
Awesome.
And as I'm accelerating, here is this guy's just soaring along right beside me, just maybe 15 feet off the ground.
Yeah, you've seen the Odies that people use for. Well, they have one for hang gliding too. Those guys, they have a little cockpit that hangs out from the base tube. They put their Odies on there, so they do a lot of cross country as well. We had an altimeter and all we had was an altimeter and a rate of climb indicator, which is all you really needed. You don't go far enough to really wonder where you are.
then your Vario was very much a
Well, yeah, the
feel the lift.
Vario wasn't.
Wasn't a thing then, or,
We didn't have a TE probe,
right? So it's just
so it was
a
just measuring your rate of
simple
climb.
rate of climb, or an instantaneous rate of climb.
But you could feel things. You're going slow.
That's
so
what I
you
guess I'm
could
saying.
Feel
Is that
things.
the kinesthetic feel was your Vario.
Yeah. And the smell. You could smell the change in the air.
Oh,
Yeah. If you find over farm fields, if you smell poo,
Up you go.
there's thermal.
Now
It's
you,
just like this.
well,
you got the Ventus, right?
Yeah.
I flew up in a little yellowtail dragger last year and visited one afternoon, weekday,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and I'm a guest. I was invited by Chris Atwood, who
Oh,
can't
yeah.
be here today because he's flying. But, he said, "Hey, everybody says go up anyway if you like." And I'm like, "Oh, we would like." So, but I have zero soaring cross country experience.
Well, I did too when I started.
Um,
I think of City Jerry. So.
So yeah, I'm very much, and that's what's drawn me. I'm a CFIG. I haven't given any instruction in 30 years. I have flown sailplanes 5 hours in the last 30 years. So I've been inactive. And the thing that's brought me back into it is the idea of I finally want to do some cross country, and I acquired an ASW-15 project. I'm an AP, and it won't be ready this year. That's not going to stop me from joining a
Is
club.
it a refinishing project? Or is
It's not airworthy. It's granted with a technical note, AD, in the U.S.
Yeah, I saw that too. So I saw something on Rec Aviation about ASW-15.
Yeah, the wing ribs are, and the earlier ones like mine, are wood, and that is where the entire load is transferred from the wings into the fuselage. The spar just floats, it just floats through the.
So it's the same thing
And
I
so-
brought on my Ventus.
It depends. The 4 pins carry the weight. The
Yeah.
spar just runs through the middle and gets pinned.
Just one pin.
No, it's 2.
Oh, it is too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a fork and a blade and 2
Oh,
pins.
okay. I was
But
thinking
they
that's what goes up
float.
the
It
thing.
floats in a rectangular box in the carry through with great big clearance holes. So I mean, the spar doesn't connect to the fuselage at all. All of those are transferred from the wing rib, from the alignment pinholes.
Yeah. Your drag
And so,
and your drag-
right, and so cracks in those wood ribs, and the fix is to put ASW-15B fiberglass root ribs in. So you gotta
You have to route the other one out.
carefully remove the wooden ones without grinding into the glass layers, and then put the new ribs in and remount. The critical thing is going to be remounting the alignment bushings, because
Oh.
Schleicher only allows 4/1000ths on those, and obviously you want it perfect because you don't want to create a rigging nightmare where you're, you know, really having to jiggle wiggle and
Like you had
I'll tell you what.
those replaced on yours.
Internet.
Yeah, where you heat them up like on fiberglass cigars. You heat them up and you can pull them out. And
no,
swirl
these
out.
are
But-
well, now these get epoxied into the actual ribs, but
okay.
you want that you have to create your own jig arrangement to find the location
Yeah.
of that bushing, so that and then be able to take that jig off, mount the new rib, get it epoxied in, and then take your jig in there and find the location or the hole for the pin for the bushing. Bore that hole in, and then glass the bushing in, like within 4 thousandths of the original.
Yeah, that's not easy.
It's not. That's the part that makes me nervous. But in general, it's just needs a lot of love. This particular sailplane, it's got all the. I mean, it's a 1971. It's never had anybody really care for it a lot. It's got finish issues all over, and
We got
it's.
15 in the club.
Do you?
We did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting it. Here we go.
Terry Bowles. We had 2 15s in the club. Terry Bowles.
Okay,
had
here it is.
Yeah. And
There's your blip
Here
maps
is
up
the
there.
Dr. J.
there you go. There's a book out.
And where the zone we're in is this one.
You went into Dr. Jackie /info or .info.
You use the UV viewer.
Why am I getting it down?
What's the guy's name? His wife spoke.
Short. Was it short?
Jim Short.
Yeah.
He's real active at it. So is-
Yes.
Yeah, I've got a question in regards to cross-country flying. We talked about the safety altitudes of 3, 2, 1.
Yes.
Do you still follow those same rules when you're flying in competition?
I would say yes in general terms, but, I think in competition you kind of assess the day as to is it likely that you will keep finding thermals or not, number one. And number two, you've got a lot of gliders around you, so you have a big advantage of being able to see where folks are climbing. So you're down at the seniors when there are 60 gliders in the sky together, taking off one field, one directional airfield, and landing back. The tow planes are landing back. I mean, there's a lot of activity there. But once everybody's up, you've got 60 gliders in the sky, all flying more or less the same course. So using gliders as a way to help you stay up is probably, I wouldn't say number one, but it's certainly a very significant factor. And whether you're worried about landing out, when you're low, the rules still apply. You can't be screwing around. You've got to stick to a kind of a 3, 2, 1, or you maybe make it a 2, 2.5, 1.5, or something like that. If depending on the land beneath you too, that's so much of the case. Flying on ridges, you don't have any options. The lift quits, you've got to land. So when you're flying on a ridge, you really are looking to be in a position that if something changes, the wind changes, or the ridge flattens out and it's not good lift there, you've got to be able to make a really quick decision and land somewhere. That's probably the trickiest kind of flying I've done, is being stuck on a ridge. It's not comfortable at all.
Mm.
You want to be flying a ridge with a nice valley to the one side where you can, and with not too many crops on the fields.
Mm. So if you're getting low and you're committing yourself to land, and you're 500 feet above the farmer's field, and then you catch 500 feet per minute lift right there, do you save it or do you
Where
land?
you are above the field. If you're in a position that you could just straighten out and land, that's fine. But if it's a small field and it's what your options are. I mean, 500 feet is very, very marginal. I have actually got away with Carl Strydick from about 450 feet together, but with Carl's skill and
No, I'm sorry.
we had a place to land. It was going to be in a cattle farm with not a good option on the ground, but the cattle in the field and that.
Mm.
the thermal was so strong that he banked it and banked it and banked it again, and then we had it.
Mm-hmm.
And we got away, but that's not to be recommended. I mean,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Again, the Safety Foundation recommends that 1,000 feet is where you commit.
yeah,
After that,
yeah.
that gives you plenty of time to look around, see what's on the field, what obstacles there are, and you still talk to people and let them know you're going down.
Yeah, that's if you want to stay in gliding for a long time, you can't afford to make mistakes, and that's one of the situations you don't want to get into, is weighing up whether you're going to survive it or not.
When you do your planning, at least initially when you're doing your planning, when you were drawing your lines on your chart, were you also looking at where suitable airfields are
Oh yes.
and determining what altitude you needed to get to that airfield from your
Well,
course?
Yes, I think yes, that would be one way of thinking of it. But I also don't feel like when you mark a chart with a line on it that you have to fly right on that line. You can be moving out to the side if the lift is good there, and you could deviate by a couple of miles, and keep, so long as you're generally going in the direction you want to go. You don't have to be absolutely on the line. Before you take off, you can already see where all the airfields are en route, and you go right over the top of Columbus, but you don't have to. You can be out to the side so long as you've got a good altitude, and you don't have to stick to the line. It's not a speed task that you're on. It's just a getting there task, and so the line is the perfect line if you could do it, and you can only do it if there's a cloud street there. But cloud street flying is also a skill that is very, very valuable. Here in the Midwest, if you can you can be climbing 35% of the time and cruising 65% of the time. I'd say that's very good. And you can get that statistic at the end of a flight if you use OLC. When you're out west in the United States, sometimes you can be climbing 5% of the time and cruising 95% of the time under cloud streets, and just beautiful cloud streets that are sucking. And in the end, they're sucking you. They want to suck you through 18,000, and you have to resist it and stick forward and not break into Class A airspace. So here you can consider 35 to 65 a very good performance when you're doing cross country. Probably it's often 40 to 60 is what you would be getting. What do you think, Brad?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, when
It's
you
hard
look
to
at
get below 30%.
Huh?
It's hard to get below 30.
it
To
is.
get below 30. Yeah, here in the Midwest it is. Yeah. But out west it's quite possible.
yeah.
I mean,
15
like-
to 85 is very common.
like cross country speeds here, or even a contest, if you got a day where you're over 60 mile an hour, that's a phenomenal day in the Midwest. And that would be a slow poke out
Yeah.
west. Because there's not very many days you're going to average over 60 miles an hour, even on a great day.
Well, the reason out west is that you're in much lower density air, you're at high
Right.
altitude, so your speed over the ground is much higher than the indicated speed. Here, you're lucky if you get to 10,000. I know a few of us have been to 10 or 11, even this last season, I think.
Yeah.
So, everybody got in mind some flight they might want to do this year?
I want to go to Sheridan. They got a nice grass field there. And I want to winch at that end there.
Tom, you would probably know how many pilots soloed last year at the club?
I don't know that. I would probably say in the neighborhood 5 or 6. 5 or 6.
Okay, there's nothing written on the board downstairs. I just wondered when I looked, nobody'd written up the fact that 3 or 4 different people went solo.
I kind of had lost track of that when I had to leave in August.
I'm trying to remember.
For the
One last-
instructors, Bert Compton is available after the vintage meet that was just mentioned.
Lawrenceville.
So if you've got anybody in the pipeline that can get ready by late June, he might be available.
How many folks here have got this silver badge? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So less than half of the group here have got the silver badge. Is really I think the confidence builder that keeps you moving ahead in gliding. When you get the silver badge, you really know you can fly away from the field. You can land at another place. It doesn't have to be an airport, but preferably an airport. And you've also been able then to stay in the air for 5 hours, and you've also been able to make a gain of more than 1,000 meters or 3,200 feet. I think it's an underestimated, underappreciated badge, but it's almost it's what all the long-term glider pilots start off with. They all get their silver badge somewhere along the way. So besides doing the proving grounds to build your confidence in going away from the field, getting the silver badge also entitles you to fly in contests. I don't know if the rules are still like that, but contest flying in America was limited to those who had a silver badge. I don't know if that's still the case. Huh?
I don't know if it's a gold badge distance lag.
Yes?
I don't know if that's a requirement or not. Yeah, it is at least a silver badge.
Yeah.
I know that.
One thing we need to speak to is the fact that once you start going across country, sometimes the weather is much better out there than it is here.
Yeah. And the only problem then is getting home. Huh?
You have to get high enough out there to raise it home.
Yeah, you do.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how different the conditions can be just between here and, say, Huntington or Wabash,
Cool.
or Portland. You know, Portland's notorious for stranding people. I don't know why.
Logansport used to be the place I always had problems with.
Yeah.
I guess the
The valley,
Wabash River
Wabash Valley, yeah.
runs around there, and the fields are all a little on the damp side. They do some irrigating there. And
It's like getting across that valley north of Marion,
Mhm.
or like you say, going up to Logansport. It's it's a dead zone in there.
one of the most fun things cross-country wise for me over the years was participating in, I don't know where the trophy is anymore, the trophy that we used to have between us and
It's up
Caesar
there.
Creek
It's up there.
Marion,
Yeah.
in Marion.
yeah, Marion's
It's
part
probably
of it.
been there for years now, I think.
These two.
But you know, to
Yeah.
take off your land in Caesar Creek, and then they give you a 5,000-foot tow for free,
Yep.
Of course, Jared's not
helps you
gonna
get
it
home.
next day,
You
though.
know, I mean, 5,000 times 7 miles per 1,000 feet. There, you've got 35 miles for free at the start of it.
Yeah, they would. I remember I got towed when I released. I was just a little bit east of Richmond Municipal Airport.
Yeah.
I mean, they do it a straight line. It's
Yeah.
pretty good start.
What is the distance between here and Caesar Creek?
90
I think so.
miles to Caesar
From
Creek?
here,
From here?
I used to think of it as being a 400-kilometer day, 200 down and 200 back. Now that was when we were flying out of Terry Airport. It's probably a little, well, it's less than it was out of Terry's, but it's
Yeah.
in that range. It's about 200 kilometers each way,
Yeah.
with lots of landing options.
Oh,
on the
yeah.
way.
Yeah.
Airfields.
Caesar Creek, soaring down at Dayton, south of Dayton. Except for Cambridge City. If you get low at Cambridge City, you can count the ears of corn on the crop. I know, I've been there.
Yeah.
Details
No,
of
you
the
guys should find out if it really is at Marion and go and pick it up sometime.
For
I
sure.
mean, what's the name of the pilot that does so
Jared,
well?
Jared.
Jared.
Can't think of his last name.
Jared somebody. Huh?
97 miles.
Greg Zouse,
Gazowski, yeah.
something. He's an airline pilot, I think.
Yeah.
He has a 27. That one day we got over 10,000 feet at Richmond. You know, we just went to Richmond and then Shelbyville. When I'm going into Shelbyville, he says, "Hey, Victor Tango," and goes by me, and this was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He had been to an airport southwest of Indianapolis and did 700. We did over 800K that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the longest flight in the Midwest for a long, long time.
Yeah, he I don't know what time he started, but I would guess he had to get off the ground at 10 in the morning or 9:30.
There was a pilot that flew out of Marion, Ohio, in a 15-meter glider. It was a Ventus, if I remember. And he couldn't fly any further because he was over cranberry bogs in Massachusetts. That's
Oh
where
my
he landed
gosh.
that night, in a cranberry bog.
Wow.
Yeah.
That wasn't Noyes, was it? That wasn't David Noyes, was it?
His name was David, but it wasn't Lloyd. It was David.
No, Noyes, the guy.
Yeah, Noyes. That's who
Yeah,
it was.
he
Dave
was-
Noyes.
He
Yeah.
was down at Sequatchie with us one time.
Yeah.
He flew he had a Ventus.
Yeah.
David Noyes.
Yeah, I tried to go a number of times to Pennsylvania. I flew from here to Pennsylvania once. I wanted to go to Tom Knopf's place
Oh, wow.
from here. I knew I could get a tow the next day and get halfway home at least. But I got to a little town in Grove City. It's the other side of Pittsburgh, going up north towards the lake. But I got shot down with the sea breeze coming off the lakes in the afternoon. It killed all the lift.
Mm.
Good old Dick Hutchison, my crew, arrived at the field the same time as I did.
Oh, wow.
I'd been going all day in the air, and he'd been towing the trailer. And we landed at the airfield at Grove City. Sun was just setting, and I was flying to the west, and it was beautiful conditions. No more lift anymore, and I taxied right up to where the FBO office was, and a guy came out and grabbed my wing. He said, "Welcome to the fly-in." I said, "What?" He said, "Where do you come from?" I said, "Indianapolis." He said, "In a glider?"
That's cool.
We didn't get back till I think 3 o'clock in that evening because it's a long drive back.
That's like 7.5 hour drive, isn't it?
That was taken off from Terry Airport.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay,
Well, thank you, Ron.
thanks for listening.
Yeah. Can I see this racetrack?
Help yourself to whatever you like. Oh, that's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if I could, is there another copy of that?
The copies downstairs.
Downstairs.
On the bad weather days, we can do that on the simulator.